So, thanks to Peter for filling in for me last week, and I listened to the... this time we're getting ever more sophisticated, so this time I got a link. Instead of a CD, I got a link to something or other in space that I was able to hear the talk without any hardware at all. So, thinking about the Diamond Sutra today, and remember last time I was here, I was saying that I wonder whether there have been several requests to go slower, not only with this text, but in general, to go slower. So I thought this time I would try to do that, to go slower, rather than thinking, oh, we have so much time, got to get it all in. Not to worry about that. And so we only have one more meeting on the Diamond Sutra, and I won't try to finish the Diamond Sutra, and we'll just forget about it for a while, and then we'll take it up again later. And we'll see how that feels, to take up a text for a certain amount of time, take a break, and take it up later. So that's what I'm going to try. And we'll see. You'll tell me if it works out or not. So this makes it better. We don't just take it easy, take our time, rather than rushing. And I think it'll be a more effective study that way. So, to begin again, at the beginning, you're reviewing, you remember, the sutra begins with the Buddha, Subhuti asking the Buddha about the path that we're following, the Bodhisattva path. How should a Bodhisattva stand, walk? How should she or he control their thoughts? That's the question that sort of elicits the whole material of the sutra. And this is to be taken both literally, how stand, how walk, how work with our thoughts, but also figuratively, how stand might mean what qualities, what capacity should we develop, how walk, what ethical conduct, what guidelines should we have, how control our thoughts, what attitudes should we be developing. And then, as we noticed, the Buddha's wonderful and surprising response was to, in a sense, not take up the details of that question, but instead to say that all the Bodhisattva has to do is to develop a thought, or give rise to a thought, give birth to a thought. And the thought is, I will save all beings. All kinds of beings, no matter what kind it is. And having saved all beings, no being at all will be saved. Why? Because bodhisattvas have no perception of a self, no perception of a being, no perception of a person. So, in this very beginning of the sutra, as we talked about last time, we see the point of the sutra and the point of the bodhisattva path, this twin or double-edged sword of compassion, emptiness. Compassion, emptiness, which is two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, a tremendous altruism and love for all beings, and not only a love, but a desire to be active in benefiting them, on the one hand. And on the other hand, emptiness, the recognition that beings are not what we think they are, that saving is not what we think it is, that beings are without separateness, without substance, without fixed reality, and therefore, and that itself is their salvation. And the problem with beings is that beings are suffering, we are suffering because of not knowing who we are, so as soon as we know who we are, beings are saved, we are saved, and as soon as we know who beings are saved. So seeing the empty nature of ourselves and of beings is the salvation. And this emptiness of beings is, on the one hand, certainly a philosophical assertion, a religious doctrine. But in the sutra we learn that this has to do, this philosophical assertion or doctrine, actually has to do with our very acts of perception. So emptiness is a psychophysical reality as well as a philosophical reality. It's there in the acts of perception. In English, as well as in Sanskrit and in Buddhist psychology, perception means literally to grasp something. To perceive something is to grasp something. So, on a practical level, apart from philosophically and religiously, emptiness means physically to perceive with the inner, maybe we could say, relaxation that comes from the recognition physically that there's nothing to grasp, and so nothing to perceive. So perception can be soft, knowing that the perception that we usually practice of objects, separate objects, is a kind of illusion. It's a kind of magic show. We're seeing something and interpreting it as being something that it actually isn't. A person, a being, a separate autonomous entity. And so the compassion of the Bodhisattva is a compassion that recognizes that perception, grasping objects, is false. So that this compassion is not an exhausting compassion, and a burdensome compassion, an obligatory compassion, but a soft, energizing, non-exhausting compassion. So it's not hard, it's not troublesome, it's not difficult. So then, it makes sense that the next topic that would be taken up in the sutra is the one that Peter was talking about last week, the topic of dana paramita. Right? How does a bodhisattva conduct herself? By having this altruism and this emptiness at the same time. Well, then how do you practice giving? How do you practice benefiting others? That's the next sort of logical question. And the Buddha goes on with this as he's continuing to answer Subhuti's original inquiry. And again, as we were talking last week, as Peter was talking with you last week, the essence of giving as a bodhisattva practice, bodhisattvas who practice emptiness as well as compassion, the essence of giving is unattached giving, giving without attachment, giving based on non-perception, non-grasping, non-grasping of sights, smells, and so on. Now, when you read it in the sutra, at first it seems esoteric or unusual, but actually we're quite used to this kind of talk when you think about it. It goes to the question of intention and motivation. And in almost all moral systems, including the moral systems that most of us grew up with, it's always taught that one ought to do good without ulterior motives, right? Without doing good so that you can get credit, or so that you can get powerful, or so that you can get praise. If I'm doing good for personal gain, this is not as good as my doing good just because it's good, for altruistic reasons, for reasons of kindness. And if you say, well, why is that so? You just have to put yourself in the other position and be someone who's receiving benefit from another. And you know that when somebody is giving something to you and they have ulterior motives, they're trying to get praise, they're trying to feel good about it, they're trying to get some advantage from it, you feel that. You know that when you receive the gift from them. You immediately know that, and it doesn't feel so much like a gift. Sometimes when you're a kid, you feel like all your parents' kindness. How kind is it really? Maybe they have ulterior motives, Maybe they're overly identifying with you, and therefore it's not really some pure love, but it's some sort of need on their part. One feels this sometimes, So we know the difference. And we can really appreciate, to do good, to give a gift out of just a pure motivation, just wanting to give. That really feels good if you're the one who receives the gift. So you can tell the difference. It's not just some sort of moral equation. It actually, practically speaking, makes a big difference in the way you feel. So that's the best kind of giving. The truest kind of giving is to give without expecting something in return, without accruing some merit, just out of love of giving and out of kindness. And apart from all this emptiness stuff, that's also what's being said here. The Buddha seems to be saying that the essence of the Bodhisattva path is to practice giving in this spirit, with a pure heart, with a selfless motivation. Now, given all that, suppose then that we're meditators and people who cultivate the inner eye so that we can actually see our own motivations. We have a lot of closeness to our own process, and we scrupulously, we can't help ourselves. We practice looking within at what's actually going on beneath the level of the stories we're telling ourselves. And when you have that practice, as the Buddha did and as his followers did and as we do, you can't help but notice that it's very hard to find an act of giving without some little tiny selfish motivation in there somewhere. There's always some self-serving motivation, even if we're not trying in any overt way to get ahead or get a reward for our giving or even praise for our giving or even kindness from others and appreciation for others from others for our giving. Still, maybe somewhere in ourselves we're congratulating ourselves. Yeah, that was really good. I'm really good what I did there. That was really good. I'm doing it right now. I'm an admirable person. I'm a great person. I'm a good person. And there's nothing wrong with that, except that, again, if you look within and you follow your process, you see how that eventually leads to some sort of discomfort, disappointment, suffering, unhappiness. You begin to notice how it is that every, even small piece of self-clinging eventually takes you down that road to unhappiness. Because there's a subtle arrogance that goes with it. And that little bit of arrogance, however small it may be, tends to be like a little wire that you trip over at some point. So if you follow this very simple moral equation deeply enough, just do good to do good, you eventually come to the recognition that to do good, really to do good, without any arrogance at all, without any grasping at all, you finally recognize there's no such thing as quote-unquote doing good. There's no such thing as quote-unquote giving, or a receiver of a gift, or the gift itself. You begin to realize that that's, as soon as you have a gift, a receiver, and a giver, then there's some arrogance. Because what do we actually have? Who's actually got anything? Who's got anything that you somehow produced or earned on your own, that you actually have? And what is it that the other person that you're giving to actually lacks? Do they lack something? Do they really lack something that you're giving them that they didn't have already? And how real is the separation between us, the fortunate and the unfortunate one? Is there really some kind of real difference between us? So in this way, we arrive very organically at emptiness, at non-perception. And non-perception, sounds, again, it sounds drastic in the Buddhist terminology. It doesn't mean that the world suddenly disappears and we're seeing a blank, but that we see in a heartfelt way, almost, viscerally, the vanity of all of our perceptions and all of our conceptions. Here they come. Here they come. My God, and it's Rick Spencer too from Vancouver. So let's let them. I'll stop just for a moment and let them enter. Yeah, we can all stand up and cheer. Yeah, you made it. Sorry guys. And I didn't realize Rick was coming too. So these are our great everyday Zen leaders from far away, who I see all the time, but you don't ever see. So it's nice to have them here. Welcome, guys.
Come up front.
Yeah, there's plenty of room up front. Yeah. No, not at all. Thanks for saving me from total embarrassment and chagrin. It took me about half the period of Zazen to recover from. And I think I actually probably drove by Manzanita just when you were standing there. Yeah, I don't know. My communication system is too complicated for me. Anyway, here we all are. We were just talking about giving, the emptiness of the giver, the receiver, and the gift. So seeing this, kind of looking within and seeing the arrogance that comes with thinking that we're a giver, giving a gift to some poor unfortunate who doesn't have it. Not realizing that we have nothing to give. They don't lack anything. And the separation between us is bogus anyway. We see the vanity of all of our conceptions and perceptions, and then, thank goodness, we can let go pretty completely. And giving doesn't need anymore to be the shaky, exhausting proposition that it seemed to be before. And free of giving, we can give and enjoy ourselves in the process. We can give freely and purely and not even have any concept that we're giving anything, that we're doing anything at all. We're just functioning as a normal being would. There's no pressure in it. There's no credit and there's no pressure. And there's a beautiful saying about this that Red Pine quotes from one of the Chinese masters he's following, Shufa, says, and this is from page 93, a person who is attached to objects is like a bird that walks on the sand, while a person who is not attached to objects is like a bird that flies through the sky. The one leaves tracks, while the other leaves none. So the bird that walks on the sand is like practicing giving, thinking that you're giving something to someone. You can give, and it's not that this is not locomotion. The bird is going. But, soaring in the sky is not quite the same as a bird walking on the ground. In the one case, there's tracks. In the other case, there isn't. And to be sure, birds are capable of walking on the ground and of flying. And so are we. We're capable of walking on the ground and of flying. We can do both. And we have to do both. But for birds, flying is the true element. Flying is what birds were made for. They can walk, but flying is what they were made for. When a bird is flying, there's freedom. Because a bird is fulfilling its function. And also we are made to fly, too. And when we can fly in the way that the Buddha is suggesting here, to give without giving, to give without perceiving, without holding anything, then we fly. We can practice empty compassion. And then we're in our true element, without leaving any tracks at all. The sutra goes on. Thus, Subhuti, fearless bodhisattvas should give a gift without being attached to the perception of an object. And why? Subhuti, the body of merit of those bodhisattvas who give a gift without being attached is not easy to measure. What do you think, Subhuti? Is the space to the east easy to measure? No. Space to the south, to the west, to the north, in between, above, below, or in any of the 10 directions, is the space easy to measure? No. So it is, Subhuti. The body of merit of those bodhisattvas who give a gift without being attached is not easy to measure. It's a bit of an ironic understatement. In other words, it is immeasurable. Thus, Subhuti, those who set forth on the bodhisattva path should give a gift without being attached to the perception of an object. So there are two sort of key words, phrases in there that I want to comment on. The first one is the fearless bodhisattva, just sort of slips that in. The fearless bodhisattva. And I know that probably everybody here has heard me say this a million times, because to me it's one of the most important and little remarked upon aspect of the Diamond Sutra, and also you see the same thing in the Heart Sutra. Without any hindrance, no fears exist. The referencing of fear and the fearlessness of the bodhisattva is a very, very important point. Just as when we look within, as I was saying a moment ago before the guys walked in, when we look within at ourselves and how we actually practice giving, the closer we look, the more we see subtle clinging, and with the clinging we see arrogance, and with the arrogance we see trouble. If we look, we have to notice that goes on. In the same way, if we really look within, we have to admit there is really a lot of fear inside of us. This is such a deeply held human emotion. It's impressive, how much fear there is in us that most of the time we don't notice, but it arises with great irrationality, from time to time. And there's just a lot of anger too, and mostly the anger that we feel has behind it the fear. In fact, fear may be the most constant and the most powerful of human emotions. And why would we be so afraid all the time? Underneath the surface of our comfort, because we understand that we are, by our nature, vulnerable, radically vulnerable, ultimately and inevitably, utterly vulnerable. And the only way around this vulnerability, we try to protect ourselves against it. It never works. There's always fear because we know it's not going to work, and yet we keep trying. The only way to overcome this fear is by completely letting go, which means to see that there has never been anything to hold on to, that everything we think we are and possess, the body, the mind, the stuff, the thoughts, the great wisdom, the knowledge, it's all, ungraspable, it's all empty, it's all insubstantial. It can't really be, every perception of it is just a concept. And this is why, this is the emptiness of it all. Bodhisattvas perceive that things are empty, and so naturally, fearlessness would be the mark of a bodhisattva. We're trying to practice to expand our level of comfort, to really be fearless. So that's one thing that I just want to point out in there. And the other thing is this phrase, which Red Pine makes a lot out of, and it's a translation that's unique to him, more or less, the body of merit. Punya skanda, the body of merit. And let me read you his interesting gloss on this word skanda, because we know this word well, and we've over the years talked about the 5 skandhas many times. But I learned something here that I never heard of before, and maybe it's even true. I don't know. There's a lot, because when it comes to etymologies, one of the most common things in religion is spurious etymology. You always see that. And of course, etymology itself is always subject to, it's always a little bit shaky, right? But anyway, here's what he says. The word skanda, so punya means meritorious, auspicious, goodness, Skanda also has a long history of usage and a number of meanings. Most translators render it by aggregate, heap, or store, which is the usual translation. That's the one we know. The 5 skandhas, the 5 heaps, the 5 aggregates. This is how it is usually translated when it refers to the 5 skandhas of form, sensation, perception, volition, and cognition, in which we search for a self in vain. So, to make a long story short, this is a Buddhist alternative way of looking at human experience. Usual way is me. I'm this, I'm that. The Buddhist way is to divide experience up into phenomena. It's very phenomenological, right? Different kinds of phenomena which are divided into 5 heaps, 5 groups. So if you analyze your experience in terms of these 5 heaps, 5 groups, you have a different subjectivity than if you think it's all about me. And it's not only Buddhism, you have that also in Western philosophy. Hume made a kind of a similar thing in the whole phenomenology. In 20th century Western philosophy makes the same kind of distinction. Don't think about the subject, think about what happened, what's going on. Look at experience. So that's what skanda is. Skanda means different categories of experience, heaps of experience. But then, red pine. But such renderings hardly do skanda justice, the word skanda justice. The primary meaning of skanda is not a pile, but a body minus its appendages. Never heard of that. The word is derived from the root skund, meaning to ejaculate, like semen, So who knew? And it originally referred to such things as a tree trunk or a human torso. Now what the tree trunk or a human torso has to do with ejaculation of semen is anybody's guess, but I'm just reading what it says here. So thus it would be more appropriate to call these skandhas bodies, as we do when we speak of an artist's body of work. So we have an artist here, so he has a body of work. He's developing a body of work, and that's the word you use, a body of work, even though there is no body there, but somehow it's 2 artists sitting side by side. And a lawyer in case they sue each other. Their unity is not an accidental agglomeration of disparate stuff. Nor do they only exist in some future bank account, but right now, and so on. So that's where he gets the translation. Not heap of, other translators say heap of merit, and he says body of merit. Now, the reason why this is so important, at least to Red Pine, is that, remember a couple of weeks ago when I was reading you from Red Pine's introduction to the sutra, and he says very strikingly, and I noticed it, and I pointed it out to you, he says very strikingly, this sutra is not about emptiness, as everybody always thinks. It's actually about bodies. It's about the Buddha's body and our body. So this notion of a body becomes very important to him as he translates this sutra and as he's trying to figure out what it means. And I think that this idea is as far as I can tell, a unique, creative idea of Red Pine. The other idea of Red Pine that I think is also unusual, probably not entirely unique, but unusual, is most people who read the sutra read it as if Subhuti knows what he's talking about. Subhuti's kind of like a mouthpiece for the Buddha. He knows what he's talking about. Where Red Pine reads it as though Subhuti is often incorrect and Buddha is correcting him. So Buddha's learning as he goes along. I don't think most commentators say that. So that changes the way he reads the sutra. Here, he's emphasizing the idea of the body. And this body of merit, which we just learned, has no limit. It's measureless. It's like space. You can't measure it. There's no limitation to it at all. This body of merit is the body of the Buddha, the body of the Bodhisattva. And he says in his commentary that it is associated, that it is the Dharmakaya body, the true body of the Buddha, which is without limitation, without form. And this Dharmakaya Buddha's body of Buddha, the ultimate Buddha body, is contrasted to the Nirmanakaya body, which is a human body, that the Buddha also possessed a human body made of the four elements, which, when the four elements dissipate, the body disintegrates and goes back to the four elements. The Sambhogakaya body, which is called the reward body. It's translated to mean the reward body or the enjoyment body. And this is a pure body of virtue associated with the spiritual life, with spiritual practice and refinement. Refined states of mind and meditation and so on, that we produce a body of refinement, of enjoyment, of merit. But it's still a limited body. So in both the Nirmanakaya and the Sambhogakaya, there's an actual body there, a body that can be improved, that can be perceived by others, and there's practice, there's effort, and there's benefit. And this is what we know about. We know through our own efforts that we can practice. We do see benefit. We do feel the blessings of the practice to a tremendous extent. It's one of the joys of my job, is hearing from people the benefits that they're feeling from the practice, the blessings that people are feeling from the practice. But eventually, as long as there are benefits and blessings in this body, we always might have the possibility of running out of blessings after a while, running out of goodness, running out of benefit. And then we get old and we fall apart, and we might even get bored with our practice, and pretty soon there's nothing, and we could fall into despair. Why? Because we have a perception of a self, a being, a soul, or a person. And that eventually limits us, and we wear down. But this body, this merit body, is this Dharmakaya merit body is like space. It's formless, it's unlimited, it doesn't have any marks, so it can never wear out, and it couldn't possibly be boring. We could never get tired of it, because it has nothing about it that we could ever get tired of. And also, for me, whenever I hear this kind of use of the word body, which is often an important use in Buddhist teachings, I always think of Dogen and his teachings about the body, especially when he talks about Zazen. And it really seems true to me, that when we sit down in Zazen, we take this confused, sad, limited, aging human body, and we release it to its Dharmakaya aspect. We give it over to the merit body of the Buddha. When we enter into awareness, when we dissolve our thoughts and our feelings into our pure awareness, which we enter exactly through the gate of the body and the breath, we feel that there's no limit, no shape, no form to this very body, that there's no end to it and there's no possible disaster. The feeling of well-being that we can have when we enter into true zazen goes beyond something physical and goes beyond something psychological. It really is like space. As the Buddha says with probably a little chuckle, this is not easy to measure. So the practice of giving, this is still about the practice of giving, the merit, body of this particular way of practicing giving without objects, without givers, without gifts, without recipients. This practice of giving is just this limitless, measureless, unstoppable space. So it isn't, I'm giving you something. It's really a kind of joyful open-handedness that is the ultimate expression of the real. So it's way beyond, apparent acts of giving. Every moment, is by its nature this merit body, this ultimate, open-handed, generous expression of the real. So it's a profound teaching, don't you think? So wonderful.
Isn't there some phrase that goes just by living is an act of giving?
Yeah. Anything that any activity is an act of giving. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So this is section 5. I know I'm going over territory that's already, but what we already agreed, we're going to go slow, so why not? And I got stuck here. I couldn't go on, with that. What do you think, Subhuti? Can the Tathagata be seen by means of the possession of attributes? Which follows from the previous, right? If it's all limitless, it's like space, then what are we talking about? Is there actually a Buddha that we could identify who has attributes? Or, are we all floating in space here? Is there any? What are we talking about? So, does the Buddha have any attributes that we could know? So this is the Buddha now quizzing Subhuti, and Subhuti answers, "No, indeed, Buddha. The Tathagata cannot be seen by means of the possession of attributes. And why not? Bhagavan, when the Tathagata, what the Tathagata says is the possession of attributes, is no possession of attributes." So this having been said, the Buddha told the Venerable Subhuti, since the possession of attributes is an illusion, Subhuti, and no possession of attributes is no illusion, by means of attributes there are no attributes, by means of attributes that are no attributes, the Tathagata can indeed be seen. I better read that again, because I'm not sure I got it right. Since the possession of attributes is an illusion, and no possession of attributes is no illusion, by means of attributes that are no attributes, the Tathagata can indeed be seen. So really the original question was, can you see the Tathagata? Is there anybody there? Is there any, can we discourse with the Buddha? Can we study with the Buddha? Because the Buddha, you just told me that the Buddha is essentially space. So what about that? So this is where the DiamondSutra tends to lose us all, leave us all in the dust with this kind of expressions. And these questions that are questions, inquiries about the Buddha, are equally inquiries about us. It's not just the Buddha. Can any of us be said to have attributes? Can we see anybody? In what way? So I'm going to read you a couple of commentaries to that section and see if I can, using these commentaries and a few extra words, say something that will make it less than abstruse. So this is Red Pine himself. And I think it's pretty clear what he says. The Buddha's point is that while we can view the attributes of the body as an illusion, if we can see them as no attributes, as not severed, in other words, seeing attributes as no attributes means seeing them as not severed from the seamless fabric of reality. Attributes as separate from reality, seeing them as no attributes is seeing that they're not separate from the fabric of reality. And when we see attributes like that, so in other words, we see people arising not as Harry and Joe with their quirky, stupid characteristics, but as a reality itself coming forth in this way, in the shape of this person. Wow, as messed up as they may be, wow, that's amazing. When we see that, that's called no attributes. And that no attributes necessarily includes the very attributes whose reality was just denied, because we are seeing them. Thus, the Arahan's denial of reality becomes the Bodhisattva's affirmation. So I don't know about that, that's a little suspect, but this technique is used repeatedly throughout this sutra, this little technique of logic, to say attribute, no attribute, therefore attribute. It is used repeatedly throughout this sutra to demonstrate through logic what the word emptiness often fails to convey by itself, because emptiness does conjure up nothing. It doesn't mean nothing. It means basically seeing something that's actually there in a totally different aspect. Instead of seeing it as this unpleasant difficulty, you see it as manifested Buddha reality. Same thing, and it's there, but it now feels differently, and certainly you'll react to it in a different way. And then he says, meanwhile, Zen masters often shortened this logical technique even further by holding up one finger, by refusing to speak, by striking their disciples, or by offering them a cup of tea. So all these gestures of the Zen masters are expressing this same point. Then another commentary, this one is one by Tseng Feng Yi, says, Subhuti realizes that the Dharma body has no attributes, but he does not yet understand, and this follows the idea that Subhuti is learning as he goes along. He does not yet understand that the Dharma body is not separate from attributes. Thus, the Buddha approves what he says, but adds that since all conditioned attributes arise from illusions, and illusions are essentially empty and lack any nature of their own, all attributes are false as separate attributes. But since attributes are false, what is not an attribute is real. Thus, you don't have to leave these illusory attributes to seek a Buddha of no attributes somewhere else. So, it's the same idea, that the attributes are denied means the attributes as separate, conventional attributes are denied and instead elevated. And those very attributes that are not attributes are the attributes of the Buddha. So the very attributes of ourselves that are not what we think they are our sacred characteristics. And then he says, form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. So this is the sort of basic logic of the DiamondSutra, which repeats over and over again throughout the sutra. This kind of thing, by means of attributes that are no attributes, the Tathagata in the end can be seen. There is perception. Perception is known as no perception, non-perception. So to negate attributes, just the same way that we negate beings that we save, right? No beings are saved. Gifts that we give, no gifts are given. Is not to destroy attributes and beings and gifts, or to posit a kind of heavenly, spiritual never-never land in which we're beyond attributes and bodies and perceptions. so that you would come to the conclusion, well, nothing is real. Everything is empty, nothing exists. And then maybe soon after that, and what's the point of living, of practice? What are we doing? No. Attributes as no attributes, that's how we appreciate attributes. Giving as non-giving, that's how we appreciate giving. Perception as non-perception, that's how we appreciate perception. In other words, this is a radical and sublime affirmation of attributes. That's why in Zen the emphasis is not on purifying and improving our character, smoothing it out. The emphasis is on affirming the attributes that we have. And once they're really affirmed, by that very fact of seeing them in another light, they're transformed, not by improving them, but by affirming them. So this is a radical and sublime affirmation of attributes, gifts, beings, perceptions, bodies, and so on, but not as fixed, separate, discrete, weighty, problematic things that will inevitably lead to trouble and sorrow. We affirm them in their freedom, in their connectedness, in their luminosity, in their limitlessness, in their all-inclusiveness, which means in their emptiness, which is no blankness or voidness or spiritualization of reality, but a concrete affirmation of it. Dogen's term, one of Dogen's many terms for Zazen is self-enjoyment samadhi. Sitting in Zazen and really enjoying our lives. So in the affirmation of the body, we really enjoy the body. And we enjoy our life when we practice this altruistic emptiness, friendliness, limitlessness. So this is the Diamond Sutra teaching. Is this the basic Diamond Sutra logic, which is repeated many times throughout the sutra, so it's worth paying attention to it in its first iterations. And I guess you could say that this certainly it's a philosophical teaching. It's a religious teaching. But I would posit that, this is my question for you. If this teaching, what attitude? Because remember, we start out, how should the bodhisattva control her thoughts? Meaning, what attitude should be cultivated? So if this teaching is so, if we appreciate it, what attitude toward our lives would we have? How would we translate? Because, this could be a wonderful abstraction, and then, so I believe that now, and now back to business as usual. But no, this would change our attitude, I think. And how would it change it? I mean, not to anybody, but you, each one of you. How would it change your attitude in living? And how would you describe, if you could, that change in attitude? Or that attitude. Maybe it's not a change, maybe that is your attitude, but how would you describe it? So that's my little question for you tonight, and maybe we can find two partners. Maybe we all stand up and stretch for a second and find two partners, and maybe we can discuss that.